she was just a poor girl, fighting every day to keep her sister alive, clinging to hope when the world gave her nothing but loss. Then came the moment her hidden struggles were
Hey,
exposed,
are you okay?
sparking rumors,
Wake up.
betrayal at work, and a corporate battle powerful enough to strip away everything she loves.
Hey, are you
Now,
okay?
with judgment closing
Wake
in,
up.
she must summon the courage to turn pain into strength and hardship into a chance at redemption. Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country below, and let's begin this journey together. Emily Carter had always been good at hiding. Hiding her fear, hiding her desperation, hiding the shaking in her hands as she scanned the numbers on yet another hospital bill. On paper, she was just another quiet, competent accountant at Sullivan Corp, sliding unnoticed between endless cubicles and the smell of burnt coffee. But outside those office walls, her world was barely holding together. It was 7:13 a.m., and the office was mostly empty except for the cleaning crew and a handful of overachievers. Emily's seat was already occupied by her, stacks of paperwork spilling across her desk. She blinked hard, rubbed her eyes, then opened her inbox, dreading what she'd find. Her heart skipped when she saw the subject line. Grace Carter, payment past due. Not now, please, not now. Her little sister, Grace, only 17, needed dialysis 3 times a week. The hospital wasn't heartless, but their patience was running out. Every month, Emily stretched her paycheck so thin it was almost see-through. Rent, groceries, hospital bills, medication, bus fare, vitamins, the special low-sodium snacks for Grace, and now, prenatal vitamins, hidden in the bottom of her purse. That secret was hers alone. Not even Grace knew. As she took her first sip of cold coffee, the elevator doors pinged. Emily tensed. Rumor had it the new CEO liked to show up early, catching employees off guard. Sullivan Corp was in chaos. Top-floor shakeups, layoffs, HR whispers about new policies. Everyone was on edge. Ethan Sullivan, barely in his 30s, was the son of the late legendary Mr. Davis Sullivan. People said Ethan was nothing like his father. Tough but fair, never smiling unless he meant it. Emily had seen him just once, at a company-wide meeting after his father's funeral. He looked like a man holding himself together with wire, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, speaking with a voice that quivered with both authority and loss. Emily returned to her work, hoping to disappear. Numbers made sense. They didn't judge, didn't gossip, didn't pity. She lost herself in spreadsheets, building careful walls of data around her life. Her phone buzzed. A message from Grace. Feeling dizzy. Did you pick up my pills? She answered, on my lunch break, promise, and swallowed the guilt. The truth was, she might not have enough left this week to get them. Her boss, Ms. Jennings, swept past, hair always pulled tight, lips pinched, eyes scanning for weakness. Emily, those quarterly projections better be ready for review by 10. Yes, ma'am. I'm almost done, Emily replied, her voice steady. Ms. Jennings barely looked at hers, already focused on the next crisis. By noon, the office buzzed with gossip. 2 people from legal had been let go that morning. Someone said Ethan had fired them himself. The mood was tense, the air thick with anxiety. Emily forced herself to eat a bland salad, watching her coworkers laugh over sushi and fancy takeout. She checked her bank balance, jaw tightening. She excused herself to the bathroom, closed herself in the last stall, and reached into her bag for the bottle of prenatal vitamins. She dry swallowed 2 pills, then pressed her forehead against the cool metal door. Don't cry. Don't you dare. When she finally looked up, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Pale, shadows under her eyes, a hint of something softer in her cheeks. She ran cold water over her wrists and returned to her desk, face blank as ever. Her computer pinged again. A reminder. Grace. Dialysis. 4 p.m. Payment required. A migraine hammered behind her eyes. She'd already delayed payment twice. If they lost Grace's spot at the clinic. Emily shut her eyes, counted to 10, and forced herself to focus. By 3 o'clock, she'd finished the projections, double-checked her work, and emailed Ms. Jennings. No mistakes. No drama. No one would suspect the storm raging under her skin. A sudden shadow fell across her desk. Emily looked up, startled. Ethan Sullivan himself stood there, tie slightly askew, eyes sharp. "You're Emily Carter?" he asked quietly. She nodded, nerves jangling. Did he know? "I've been reviewing some of your department's reports. Good work. Thank you for the overtime hours." She nodded again, too stunned to speak. He paused, eyes lingering on the hospital bill sticking out from her paperwork before looking away politely. "If you need anything, support, resources, time off, let HR know. My office is open. Really." Emily wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that. Support? Time off? As if either were possible. She managed a faint, "Thank you, sir," and watched him stride away, leaving a faint ripple of whispers in his wake. The rest of the day blurred. More emails, more numbers, more phone calls from the hospital. When the clock struck 5, she gathered her things and walked into the evening chill, her purse heavy with secrets, her heart even heavier. She rode the bus home in silence, staring at her reflection in the window, one tired woman holding the world together with hope and determination, and nothing else. Tonight, she would sit with Grace, try to smile, heat up canned soup, and listen to her sister talk about things Emily barely had the energy to follow. She'd stroke Grace's hair, promise tomorrow would be easier, even as she worried about how to pay for it all. And when her sister finally drifted off, Emily would stare into the darkness, hands over her belly, whispering silent prayers for the future. It was another late night at Sullivan Corp. The office lights burned long after the city outside had fallen into its evening hush. Most people had gone home hours ago, but Emily Carter sat hunched over her computer, fingers numb, eyes straining to decipher the endless maze of numbers. The only sounds were the quiet whirring of the cleaning crew's vacuum and the soft clatter of her keyboard. She couldn't remember the last time she'd gotten a full night's sleep. Each hour she worked was a gamble, buying more time for Grace, risking her own health for a paycheck that was already promised to a dozen collectors before it landed in her account. The dizziness had grown worse all week, but she forced herself to ignore it, just as she ignored the ache in her back and the gnawing hunger in her stomach. She'd skipped dinner again, saving the leftovers for Grace, telling herself she'd eat later. Her vision blurred as she finished a final spreadsheet. The hospital had called twice today, reminding her of the overdue payment for Grace's dialysis. Each reminder had sounded a little colder than the last. Her phone vibrated now. "Emily, don't forget my appointment tomorrow. I love you." Grace always tried to sound cheerful, hiding the pain behind her texts. Emily smiled sadly, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The world narrowed to a tunnel, the glow of the monitor, the ticking clock, the steady pounding in her temples. She stood up too quickly, intending to grab a glass of water. The room spun, tilting under her feet. She blinked, tried to steady herself, reached for the desk, and then the ground disappeared. When Emily woke, the world was white and humming. Bright fluorescent lights above her, the crisp, antiseptic smell of a hospital, a soft beeping somewhere to her right. She blinked, disoriented, and tried to move. Pain shot through her body, a deep, hollow ache, like her bones were filled with ice water. Someone spoke her name gently. "Emily? Emily, can you hear me?" She turned her head. Ethan Sullivan sat beside her bed, sleeves rolled up, a crease of concern between his brows. It was almost absurd. Her boss, the CEO, in a hospital chair at 2 in the morning. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. "Don't try to get up," he said quietly. "The doctors said you collapsed at your desk. I drove you here." The memories came rushing back, her head spinning, the world going dark. Shame flushed through her. She'd always prided herself on never letting anyone see her weakness. Now Ethan Sullivan had seen all of it. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand, eyes warm but direct. "Miss Carter, you fainted due to exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. Your blood pressure was dangerously low. Are you eating enough?" Emily looked away, biting her lip. Ethan glanced between them, his gaze sharpening. The doctor hesitated, then continued. "Given your condition, it's even more important to take care of yourself. You're under a lot of stress. We'll need to run a few more tests." Emily's cheeks burned. She saw Ethan register something in the doctor's tone, his expression flickering with surprise and concern. "What condition?" he asked quietly. The doctor gave her a searching look. "Emily, do you want to discuss this privately?" She nodded, barely able to meet Ethan's eyes. He stood, hands in his pockets, and said, "I'll step outside. If you need anything, I'll be right here." The moment he left, Emily's composure cracked. Tears stung her eyes. Anger, shame, fear, exhaustion, all tangled together. She answered the doctor's questions, voice barely above a whisper, promising she'd take better care of herself, promising she'd try. But deep down, she knew it was a lie. Every dollar, every minute, every heartbeat belonged to Grace. There was nothing left for herself. When the doctor finished, she gave Emily a small, sad smile. "You're not alone, you know. People want to help." Emily didn't answer. She doubted it was true. After the doctor left, Ethan returned, more awkward than before. He sat down and handed her a bottle of water. "Drink," he said, and when she hesitated, he added, "Please." She took it, hands trembling. There was a long silence. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice low and steady. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. The company should be taking better care of you." He didn't sound like a CEO. He sounded like a man who knew something about loss. Emily forced herself to nod. "Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." He shook his head. "You're not trouble. You're a damn miracle, Emily. Most people would have given up a long time ago." For a moment, the words hung between them, hope and regret, exhaustion and possibility. Sunlight began to filter through the hospital blinds, painting gold stripes across the sterile floor. Emily closed her eyes, too tired to argue, letting herself rest for the first time in what felt like years. Tomorrow, the fight would begin again. Emily woke to the sounds of the hospital morning, carts squeaking in the hallway, a nurse softly checking her IV, distant voices muffled behind closed doors. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came back. The dizziness, the collapse, Ethan Sullivan's concerned face, the embarrassment of being seen so vulnerable. After the nurse left, Emily sat up, legs tucked beneath her, clutching the thin blanket as a shield. She glanced at her phone, seeing a barrage of messages from Grace. "Are you okay? Please text me, Em. I'm worried." She texted back a lie as gentle as she could manage. "Just tired. I'm okay. We'll call soon. Love you, Gracie." The guilt stung, but she couldn't let her sister see how close she'd come to losing everything. Not when Grace needed her to be strong. She looked at the pale light creeping through the blinds, tracing patterns across her hospital gown. Last night's conversations replayed in her mind, the way Ethan's voice had softened, the doctor's careful words about her condition, the gnawing ache of hunger and shame. She was used to carrying burdens in silence, but now someone else knew. Worse, someone with power. Emily's thoughts swirled with panic as she pictured her coworkers whispering, "Ms. Jennings from HR sniffing out any excuse to cull the weak links." The Sullivan Corp rumor mill was relentless. If news of her pregnancy or health struggles leaked, she'd be done. Later that morning, the hospital released her with stern instructions to rest, eat, and see her doctor. She knew she'd ignore at least 2 out of 3. By noon, she was already back at her small apartment, moving through the motions, heating up soup for Grace, pretending her world wasn't fraying at the seams. The familiar weight of survival settled back onto her shoulders. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from the company. "Ethan Sullivan requests to meet with you. 4:30 p.m. his office." Her hands shook. She knew what this meant. HR protocol. Probably paperwork for medical leave or, worse, a pink slip. Her thoughts spun as she dressed in her least wrinkled blouse, pinned back her hair, and dabbed concealer under her eyes. She left Grace watching cartoons, promising she'd be back soon, masking every trace of worry from her voice. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless, every ding another reminder that she didn't belong up here. The reception area outside Ethan's office was sleek, cold, intimidating. Ms. Jennings stood by the glass doors, arms crossed, lips tight. "Go in. He's waiting." Inside, Ethan stood by the window, back to her, suit jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up as if he was trying to look less like a CEO. Sunlight streaked across the desk, illuminating the lines of exhaustion on his face. He gestured for her to sit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken things. "I've looked over your work, Emily. Your department would fall apart without you." He sounded less like a boss, more like someone searching for the right words. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Thank you, sir. I know last night was unprofessional. I'm sorry if I caused—" He cut her off with a gentle wave. "Stop. You didn't do anything wrong." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "I asked HR to pull your file. You're supporting your sister alone. Medical bills, overtime, perfect attendance until now. But you never asked for help. Why?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It's not easy. People talk. You know how it is. I can't risk—" Her voice trailed off. Ethan studied her. "I get it. I do. My wife, Sophie, she fought cancer for 2 years. I saw what the hospital bills did to her family." He took a breath. as if steadying himself. I'm not my father, Emily. I want this company to stand for something better. That's why I'm making you an offer. She stared at him, bracing herself for the worst. I want you to become my executive assistant. Double your current salary, full health coverage, including for your sister, paid time off for medical emergencies, no HR nonsense. You'll report directly to me. If anyone asks, it's a merit promotion, because that's what it is. For a heartbeat, Emily couldn't breathe. The offer was everything she needed: safety, security, hope, but also risk. Gossip would fly. The scrutiny would be brutal. She imagined Ms. Jennings's face, Kyle Briggs's mocking whispers, the long shadow of suspicion that followed any woman who got too close to power. I don't know, she whispered. People will talk. They always do. Ethan shrugged, a hint of grim humor in his eyes. Let them. They talk about me too. This is business, not charity. I need someone I can trust. Emily sat frozen, her mind racing. Grace's smile, the unpaid bills, the secret growing inside her, her own aching loneliness. Behind her, Ms. Jennings watched through the glass wall, eyes narrowed, already filing this moment away for future ammunition. Emily realized there was no safe path forward, only the one she carved for herself. She nodded slowly, voice trembling but clear. I'll do it. Ethan's relief was obvious, but so was the weight of new expectations settling between them. As Emily left his office, the whispers started immediately. She felt their eyes, the judgment and curiosity, but she held her head high. For Grace, for herself, for the faint, fragile hope that things might finally change. Emily Carter had never felt more exposed in her life. The move upstairs, from the safety of accounting's quiet back row to the marble and glass world of the executive suite, was like stepping into a fishbowl. Every day felt like a test she was set up to fail. She could feel the eyes, colleagues, board members, even the cleaning staff, watching her for any sign of weakness, any proof she didn't belong. Her new office wasn't grand. A corner room with a narrow window overlooking the city, a desk that seemed too big, an ergonomic chair that never quite fit her shape. She decorated with a photo of Grace and a wilted potted plant from her old cubicle. Everything else was unfamiliar. The endless meeting requests, the color-coded schedules, the constant, relentless need to be perfect. The phone rang so often she started dreaming in ringtones. She worked grueling hours, arriving before sunrise and sometimes leaving long after dark. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she told herself she could survive anything for Grace's sake. Every minute at her desk was a minute she wasn't at her sister's bedside. She lived in a blur, navigating office politics by day, whispering reassurances to Grace in the flickering light of the hospital by night. Guilt gnawed at her no matter where she was. Her colleagues were both friend and foe. Some resented her quick promotion, assuming she'd done something to earn special favor. Others tried to be friendly, but it always felt rehearsed, as if they were watching for her to slip up. Kyle Briggs, the ambitious junior analyst, seemed to relish every small stumble. Once, after a particularly tense meeting, she overheard him laughing with another manager. "Executive assistant, huh? Must be nice to have the CEO in your corner." The words stung, but she forced herself not to react. Instead, she channeled her anxiety into work, triple-checking every report, anticipating Ethan's needs before he could ask, covering every possible angle before presentations. Ethan pushed her hard but never unfairly. He seemed to sense her pride, treating her as a partner, not just an assistant. Still, there were days when the pressure felt suffocating. Grace's illness became a silent countdown, always ticking in the background. There were nights when Emily would sit by her sister's hospital bed, holding her hand as machines hummed and beeped. Grace always smiled, even when she was in pain. "You're my hero, Em," she'd whisper. "Don't let them wear you down." But the cracks showed. Emily's temper grew short, her nerves frayed. Once, after a brutal day of meetings, she snapped at a nurse who gently suggested she get some sleep. "I can't!" she'd hissed, instantly ashamed. She spent the night crying in the hospital bathroom, fists clenched, feeling the old wounds of childhood poverty and loneliness reopening. She was still that scared little girl, always afraid of losing everything. One rare evening, after a marathon day that ended with an emergency board meeting, Ethan found her on the rooftop terrace outside the executive lounge. The city lights shimmered far below, cold wind stinging her cheeks. She'd meant to hide, just for a minute, to breathe, to cry in peace. But Ethan approached quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. They stood in silence, both staring at the city. Emily wanted to tell him to go away, to leave her alone with her hurt. But she saw something raw in his posture, a sadness she recognized. He broke the silence first. "I lost Sophie 3 years ago. She was my whole world. I never thought I'd have to learn how to live without her." Emily glanced over, surprised by his honesty. She found herself speaking before she could stop. "Grace is all I have left. Our parents died when I was 16. She was 10. I promised I'd protect her. Some days, I feel like I'm failing both of us." He nodded, understanding deeper than words. "Sometimes, doing your best means falling apart. You're not failing, Emily. You're surviving. There's a difference." For the first time, she let herself cry in front of someone at work. Tears slipped down her cheeks, cold and sharp, carried away by the wind. Ethan didn't move to comfort her, didn't reach out. He just stood beside her, bearing witness, his own eyes shining. When she was done, they stood together for a while longer, letting the night absorb their old wounds. Something unspoken shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but a bond forged from pain, understanding, and the heavy hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone as they thought. Emily went home that night lighter somehow, the pressure still there but the loneliness less suffocating. She kissed Grace's forehead, whispered a promise to keep fighting, and for the first time in weeks, let herself sleep without fear. Trouble always seemed to come when Emily least expected it. She had begun to find a fragile rhythm, splitting her life between Sullivan Corp's high-stakes executive world and the sleepless anxiety of Grace's hospital room. Each day was a balancing act, fueled by caffeine, worry, and the single-minded determination to keep her sister alive. She knew it couldn't last forever. One cold Thursday morning, the tension in the office was electric. The quarterly board meeting was just hours away, and everyone seemed more on edge than usual. Emily checked and rechecked Ethan's briefing notes, her own hands trembling as she assembled thick folders and color-coded schedules. Outside the glass doors of the executive suite, she could feel the undercurrent of suspicion, the wary glances, the unfinished sentences when she entered a room. Word was spreading. People whispered in elevators and at the coffee machine, trading rumors about why the new girl had risen so fast. Kyle Briggs was especially relentless, smirking as he passed her desk. Ms. Jennings, too, seemed to hover a little closer than before, her questions more pointed, her eyes scanning for cracks in Emily's composure. The meeting itself was brutal. Ethan was under fire from several board members, their voices sharp as they challenged his new initiatives. Emily took notes at his side, her pen moving almost automatically, mind spinning through possible disaster scenarios. Cuts to Grace's insurance coverage, demotions, layoffs. Every what-if felt personal now. As tension peaked, Emily felt a sudden wave of dizziness, a cold, nauseating swirl that made the world tilt on its axis. She gripped the edge of the conference table, struggling to steady herself, but her vision was tunneling, sound receding to a faint, echoing hum. She heard her name, distant and muffled, then the world went dark. When she came to, the boardroom was in chaos. Ethan was crouched beside her, face drawn with worry, his hand firm on her shoulder. Someone handed her water. She blinked, trying to sit up, cheeks burning with shame as the room swam with curious, judgmental faces. Ethan stood and addressed the board, voice cold and controlled. Emily's health is not a subject for speculation. If anyone has a problem with my decision to support employees facing personal hardship, they can bring it to me. Otherwise, this discussion is over. But the damage was done. In the aftermath, the rumor mill exploded. It wasn't long before Emily overheard whispers in the hall, her collapse, the hospital bills, even rumors about her pregnancy. She saw Kyle smirking by the elevator, heard Ms. Jennings speaking in low tones with HR. By that afternoon, Ms. Jennings called her into a small, sterile conference room. "We need to discuss your recent absences, Emily, and certain personal matters that have been brought to my attention." Her tone was icy, rehearsed, as she slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were notes, emails, evidence compiled by someone determined to undermine her. "We have policies about transparency and conflicts of interest. Your situation may require an internal review." Emily's heart pounded. She tried to explain, voice trembling, but Jennings cut her off. "You don't have to say anything now. But understand, your relationship with Mr. Sullivan is being closely examined. If there's been preferential treatment or any violation of company policy, you could be suspended pending investigation." The words were a punch to the gut. She left the office in a daze, fighting tears. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Dozens of messages from Grace's hospital. She answered, her voice breaking, only to hear the panicked voice of a nurse. "Emily, it's Grace. She's taken a turn for the worse. You need to come now." The world spun. She barely remembered racing out of the building, shoving past curious coworkers, ignoring Ms. Jennings's voice calling after her. The ride to the hospital was a blur, every red light an eternity. By the time she reached Grace's room, her sister was pale and feverish, machines beeping in frantic rhythm. Emily collapsed at her side, clutching her hand, pleading with silent prayers for her not to leave. Through the glass, she saw Ethan standing in the hallway, torn between the company he was fighting to save and the woman whose courage had changed him. Their eyes met through the cold, fluorescent-lit corridor. In that moment, Emily understood how much she stood to lose. She sobbed, all the strength she'd borrowed from tomorrow suddenly gone. She was exposed, her secrets no longer hidden, her family's future hanging by a thread. The outside world crashed in, harsh and unrelenting. But somewhere in the storm, a new, stubborn hope began to flicker. Emily held Grace's hand and promised she would fight, for her sister, for herself, for the right to build a life not ruled by fear and shame, no matter how dark the world seemed right now. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt like a second home now. Emily lost all sense of time as she sat beside Grace, counting the steady rise and fall of her sister's chest, memorizing each fragile moment in case it slipped away. The machines beeped a slow, uneasy lullaby. Nurses and doctors came and went, their faces kind but tired. No one could promise anything. Only more waiting, more prayers, more bills. Emily was drained in ways she'd never known possible. Yet each hour at Grace's bedside, she clung to hope, whispering promises of future sunrises. At the same time, her job at Sullivan Corp hung in limbo. She had been told to take a leave while HR conducted their internal review, but no amount of rest would calm her mind. If she lost her job, she lost Grace's insurance. If she lost that, she lost everything. It was during one of these sleepless nights that her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan Sullivan. "I need to see you, please. It's important." Emily hesitated, torn between fear and the faint hope of something better. When she finally arrived at the office the next morning, pale, exhausted, her blouse wrinkled from being slept in, she was greeted by wary glances. But Ethan was waiting for her, eyes ringed with fatigue, a certain stubbornness in his jaw. They sat together in his office, city skyline glinting in the background. He didn't waste time. "I've been thinking about what happened to you and to Sophie." His voice caught a little, and he looked away. "When Sophie was sick, the company did nothing. We lost good people, people like you, because there was no support for families in crisis. I won't let that happen again." He handed Emily a folder. Inside were documents detailing a new corporate program, the Strong Families Initiative. Medical leave for employees with critically ill family members, expanded health coverage, emergency grants, counseling services. It was everything she'd ever needed, everything she'd begged the system for, and been denied. Now her pain had become the blueprint for hope. "We're announcing it next week," Ethan said. "I want you to be the face of the project. Your story, the reality of what families go through, needs to be heard." Emily blinked, overwhelmed. She saw herself reflected in the polished office window. Tired, scared, not the picture of corporate strength. But she also saw the lines of determination in her face, the resilience she'd earned by never backing down. "Why me?" she managed. "Because you didn't give up," Ethan replied. "Because people need to see that it's possible to survive, even when it feels impossible." The next week became a blur of preparation. Sullivan Corp's PR team wanted to polish her story, but Emily insisted on honesty. She spoke about skipped meals, hospital hallways, the constant fear of losing Grace. She spoke, and she saw her colleagues' attitudes start to shift, from suspicion to sympathy, from resentment to respect. Not everyone was happy. Some whispered that she was only there because of Ethan, that the program was just for show. Kyle Briggs glared at her in meetings, barely hiding his contempt. But there were others who approached her in private. Co-workers with sick children, spouses battling cancer, parents struggling alone, who thanked her for speaking the truth out loud. The day of the project's launch arrived, and Emily found herself standing behind a podium, facing a sea of faces, board members, employees, local press. Her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded from the front row, silent encouragement in his eyes. She took a deep breath and began. She told the story she'd hidden for years, The story of loss, of late-night panic, of hope held together by willpower and duct tape. She talked about Grace, about the thousands of families like theirs, about the cost of silence. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Some faces were wet with tears. Others looked away, unwilling to meet her gaze. Emily felt exposed, raw, but also lighter. She had spoken the truth, and nothing could take that away from her. In the days that followed, the initiative became headline news. Other companies called for advice. Employees who'd kept their suffering hidden came forward, emboldened by Emily's courage. Ethan confided in her more often now, sometimes sharing unsent letters to Sophie, letting his own wounds show. Late nights in the office were different now. They worked side by side, two survivors building something that might outlast them both. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe she was more than just someone struggling to stay afloat. She was part of something bigger, something that might save lives. And when she returned to Grace's hospital room each night, she carried with her a new sense of hope, not just for her own family, but for everyone quietly fighting to hold their world together. The Strong Families Initiative made headlines in the business world, turning Emily from a shadowy figure in accounting to a minor celebrity overnight. For a while, the glare of attention felt almost protective. Her struggles had become a cause, her face the symbol of Sullivan Corp's new compassion. But as quickly as admiration came, envy and suspicion crept in. Emily's days were now filled with speaking events and interviews. She learned to steady her voice, to answer painful questions with candor, to relive the worst days of her life for the sake of others. Sometimes, after telling Grace's story for the 5th time in one day, she'd find herself standing in the bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink, willing herself not to cry. She told herself that every uncomfortable moment was worth it if even one more family found help they'd otherwise be denied. But the pressures at work didn't ease. In fact, they only grew sharper. The same colleagues who'd once ignored her now hovered close, watching for any sign she might fail. Whispers snaked through the office. Was she really just Ethan's charity case? Was her position the result of pity or something more? Kyle Briggs was the loudest. He started dropping sly comments in meetings, his words just vague enough to be deniable, but pointed enough to sting. Some people get fast-tracked for reasons the rest of us will never understand, Kyle would say, tossing a casual glance in Emily's direction. Emily tried to ignore him, but Ms. Jennings seemed emboldened by the gossip. One morning she cornered Emily in the hallway outside the boardroom. "We have standards, Emily, and policies. Remember that." Her tone was cool, her meaning unmistakable. Rumors swirled, growing louder and uglier by the day. The board of directors, concerned with appearances and corporate reputation, called for an investigation into Emily's rapid promotion. They cited potential conflict of interest, demanding that Ethan recuse himself from any decisions regarding her, and that Emily report directly to the board for the duration of the review. Ethan fought the decision behind closed doors, but there were limits even to his influence. One late evening, he found Emily still working, the city outside their windows lost in fog. He looked tired, older, weighed down by battles she could only imagine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This isn't fair, but it's the only way to keep the project alive." Emily nodded, biting back her anger. "Let them ask their questions. I have nothing to hide." But she wondered if that was really true. Her life felt like it had become a series of impossible choices, each one carving away at the person she used to be. The pressure spilled over into her home life. Grace's health wavered, a fever that wouldn't break, exhaustion that grew worse each day. The hospital's transplant team called, their voices tight with urgency. A kidney had finally become available, but the risks were enormous. Emily felt torn in two, her family and her job, both demanding more than she had to give. The night before the surgery, Emily sat in Grace's dim hospital room, holding her sister's hand as monitors beeped quietly. She tried to find the right words, to promise that everything would be okay, but all she could do was squeeze Grace's fingers and hope her love was enough. The next morning, she left the hospital just as the sun was rising, her heart aching with fear and guilt. She arrived at work barely on time, still in yesterday's clothes, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. The boardroom felt colder than ever. A long mahogany table stretched before her, lined with executives in crisp suits. Emily sat alone at the end, a single figure facing a wall of skepticism. She answered every question calmly, refusing to let her voice shake. She spoke of her work, her qualifications, her motivations, not once mentioning Ethan or her private struggles. She would not give them that power. Afterward, as the board deliberated in hushed voices, Emily stood at the window, watching the city come alive below. For the first time, she wondered if she'd survive this, if she even wanted to. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Grace was in surgery. All she could do now was wait. The company's fate, her career, her family's future, everything hung in the balance. But as the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the glass and steel towers, Emily felt a flicker of stubborn hope. She had already survived so much. She would not let them break her now. The hospital waiting room was a world of its own. Time seemed to warp, the air dense with hope and dread. Emily paced the cold linoleum floor, her phone clutched so tightly her knuckles ached. Every time a nurse appeared in the doorway, her heart leapt and fell, suspended on the edge of some unknowable future. The kidney transplant was underway. Grace's life hung in the hands of strangers, and Emily had never felt so helpless. News trickled in, complications, a spike in blood pressure, a team working overtime to stabilize her sister. Hours blurred together. Emily called Ethan once, her voice shaking. He answered immediately, even though it was after midnight, his words steadier than her own. "Whatever happens, you're not alone. I'll make sure the company supports you. Take care of your family first." The simple, unwavering support brought tears to her eyes. It was more than anyone had ever offered. As dawn crept through the smudged hospital windows, the surgeon finally emerged. "She's stable. It'll be a tough recovery, but she made it through the worst." Relief hit Emily so hard she slumped in her chair, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Grace, her fragile, stubborn little sister, had survived. But the world outside had changed. During the long hours at the hospital, Emily's life at Sullivan Corp had been set on fire. The investigation into Ethan and the Strong Family's initiative hit the news cycle, with reporters eager for a scandal. Headlines questioned favoritism, hinting that Emily's story was nothing but a PR ploy. Ethan's enemies on the board seized the moment. He was suspended pending further review, accused of bending the rules for personal reasons. The initiative was in jeopardy. When Emily returned home, reporters hovered on the sidewalk, shouting questions. Her phone buzzed with messages from old friends, strangers, and co-workers, some supportive, some cruel. She had a choice. Stay silent and let her story be twisted, or speak for herself for Grace, and for every family who needed help. With a deep breath and shaking hands, Emily agreed to a TV interview. She sat beneath glaring studio lights, powder on her face barely concealing her exhaustion. The interviewer's questions were sharp, probing for weaknesses. Emily answered honestly, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger as she spoke of hospital bills, the fear of losing her only family, the daily fight to survive. She did not speak for pity. She spoke for every person watching who saw themselves in her story. Sometimes hope isn't a feeling, Emily said, looking into the camera, voice clear. It's something you do. It's holding on when you have nothing left, because someone needs you to. That's what this program is about. The interview aired that night. Messages poured in, thousands of them. Single parents, sick children, spouses, people on the edge of giving up. Emily felt the swell of public support, a tide rising up behind her. People called Sullivan Corp's offices, demanding the initiative be kept alive, their voices too loud for the board to ignore. In the days that followed, Grace's recovery was slow but steady. Emily camped out in the hospital room, never far from her sister's side, juggling phone calls and emails in between spoon-feeding soup and holding Grace's hand through pain. She learned how resilient her sister truly was, Grace's humor returning, her eyes brighter with each passing day. Meanwhile, Ethan endured his own trial. Suspended as CEO, his reputation in the balance, he refused to abandon the cause. He called Emily often, their conversations growing more personal, confiding in her about his grief for Sophie, his fears for the company, the loneliness he'd carried for years. Through the phone, Emily sensed his strength, but also his fragility, a mirror to her own. For a while, it felt like the world was collapsing. Enemies seemed everywhere. But as Emily walked Sullivan Corp's halls, now as a guest, not an employee, she saw signs of quiet support. Co-workers giving her thumbs up, parents thanking her, even Kyle Briggs avoiding her gaze, unable to meet the eyes of someone who'd risked everything for others. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, Grace's health, the company's future, even her own job. But something inside her had changed. She had stood in front of the world, exposed and unafraid. She'd found a voice she didn't know she possessed. Whatever storm came next, she would meet it standing tall. For the first time in years, Emily Carter woke to sunlight instead of alarm bells. She was still curled on the vinyl couch in Grace's hospital room, but the world felt different. Gone was the suffocating dread that every new day would bring another disaster. In its place, a cautious, unfamiliar hope. Grace's recovery amazed even her doctors. There were setbacks, pain, infection scares, the brutal process of rebuilding strength. But the new kidney was working. Emily found herself smiling at small victories. The first time Grace asked for a milkshake. The first time she walked unaided to the window. Each moment was a miracle, hard-won and precious. Outside the hospital, Sullivan Corp buzzed with rumors and uncertainty. The board had delayed their decision about Ethan's future, swamped by thousands of emails and phone calls after Emily's interview. Employees signed petitions, advocacy groups wrote open letters. The Strong Families Initiative, once a mere pilot project, had become a cause that stretched far beyond the company's glass walls. Emily stayed by Grace's side, but news trickled in through texts and whispered visits. She learned that Kyle Briggs, faced with overwhelming public support and internal pressure, backed off, his office gossip falling flat in the face of real change. Even Ms. Jennings had softened, dropping by the hospital with flowers, her tone unexpectedly gentle. "You did more good than you know, Emily," she admitted quietly. "For all of us." Finally, the call came. Ethan, voice steadier than she'd heard in weeks, asked if she could meet him at the office. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she walked through the lobby, feeling the eyes of co-workers, some smiling, some sheepish, all changed by what had happened. It was as if she'd crossed an invisible barrier, no longer the poor girl hiding her struggle, but someone who'd faced the world and refused to break. In the boardroom, Ethan waited with the directors. He looked tired, but there was a spark of relief in his eyes. The chairwoman spoke first. "Ms. Carter, we've reviewed everything. The initiative, the investigation, the public response. Mr. Sullivan will be reinstated as CEO. We believe you both acted with courage and honesty. The Strong Families Initiative will not only continue, but expand company-wide." The words washed over Emily like warm rain. She met Ethan's gaze, both of them sharing an unspoken understanding of the price they'd paid and the distance they'd come. When the meeting ended, Ethan caught her in the hallway, voice low. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said. "You changed the company, Emily. Maybe more than you know." She smiled, a real, open smile. "We both did, and we're not finished yet." With her job restored, Emily returned to work, but nothing felt the same. She was no longer invisible. Co-workers stopped her in the hallway, some to thank her, others to share their own stories. She listened, offered advice, and found herself part of a growing network of solidarity. Ordinary people no longer hiding their struggles. But the most important change happened outside the office. Each evening, she rushed to the hospital, where Grace greeted her with a tired grin. They talked about the future, college for Grace, a proper home, maybe even a vacation somewhere warm. There was still so much to worry about. Medical bills, work stress, the weight of the world. But the terror had receded, replaced by stubborn hope. Ethan became a steady presence in their lives, stopping by with food or just to check in. Their bond deepened, but moved slowly, carefully. They both had wounds to heal, losses to grieve, trust to rebuild. Sometimes they'd sit together in the hospital courtyard after visiting hours, sharing coffee and quiet. There were moments when Emily caught Ethan watching her, something gentle and unguarded in his eyes. She felt it too, the possibility of more, but neither of them rushed. One evening, as the city lights blinked on, Grace asleep beside her, Emily let herself breathe. She'd survived shame, hardship, and heartbreak. She'd fought for her family, and in doing so helped change the world around her. She thought of her younger self, the girl who'd hidden behind spreadsheets and polite smiles, afraid of being seen. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd lost and risked everything for love, and found, against all odds, a future worth hoping for. The first morning in their new apartment dawned with a chorus of city sounds and unfamiliar brightness streaming through the windows. Emily Carter stood in the tiny kitchen, rocking gently on her heels, a mug of lukewarm coffee in one hand, and her other arm curved protectively around her swollen belly. Sunlight danced across the battered countertop and turned the hospital bills tacked to the fridge almost golden. Somehow, everything felt possible. Grace slept late, exhaustion from recovery and hope for the future making her sleep deep and dreamless. For once, Emily didn't rush to check on her. She allowed herself a moment of peace, breathing in the newness of the life they'd fought so hard to reach. There were no guarantees. Grace still had medication, checkups, and long road ahead. But the terror that had ruled their lives had been replaced by something steadier, a belief that they would get through it together. As she sipped her coffee, her phone vibrated. It was Ethan. "How are my girls today?" Emily smiled, a blush coloring her cheeks. Ethan had become a fixture in their lives, not just as a boss or a supporter, but as a partner. One who showed up, who listened, who made space for the scars and the laughter both. He'd never tried to play savior. He was simply there, steady and imperfect, a man still healing in his own right. Later that morning, they met at the Sullivan Corp rooftop, now unofficially known as Emily's Place of Peace. Ethan had brought bagels and orange juice, and together they watched the city shimmer beneath the pale blue sky. It felt almost ordinary. Two people sharing breakfast, the future spread out before them. But for Emily, it was a miracle. "Board wants us to meet the press again," Ethan said, squinting at his phone, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "They want to show the world how the Strong Families Initiative changed everything." Emily laughed. "You know, I used to be terrified of being seen. Now I can't walk into a grocery store without someone recognizing me." He grinned. "You should be proud. You changed the story for a lot of people." She looked at him, more serious now. "We changed it together." In the weeks that followed, life settled into an imperfect but beautiful routine. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby boy, with Ethan by her side, not as a savior or a fairy tale prince, but as someone who understood what it meant to lose and to keep fighting anyway. The delivery room was filled with laughter and tears, Grace clutching Emily's hand, Ethan whispering encouragement, a family bound together by choice and by survival. News of the new arrival spread quickly, and for a few days, the hospital staff made a point of stopping by, congratulating Emily and asking about the initiative. The project itself blossomed. Other companies reached out, wanting to learn, wanting to give their own workers what Sullivan Corp had pioneered. The board, once wary and divided, became champions of the cause. For the first time in company history, employees talked openly about their struggles, leaning on each other rather than hiding in fear. One crisp autumn evening, as the city glowed with sunset, Emily sat on the rooftop with her baby asleep in her arms. She wrote a letter, part journal, part promise, part love note to the girl she used to be and the world she'd helped build. To whoever finds themselves lost and fighting, don't give up on hope, even when it hides behind bills and heartbreak. You are not as alone as you think. Your story matters. The world is bigger and kinder than it seems. Keep going. As the sky faded to twilight, Emily felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. Ethan, still awkward but sincere, smiled down at her. Grace joined them, settling on the blanket with a grin. The three of them, unlikely, imperfect, utterly real, watched the city below, knowing that the hardest battles were behind them. But the best days might still be to come. They didn't have everything figured out. There would still be tough mornings and hard choices, but they faced them as a family now, armed with hard-earned trust and the conviction that what they'd built together would last. And so, under the quiet glow of the city, with her family beside her and her son safe in her arms, Emily Carter let herself hope, truly, openly, for the first time.